They said any calf left alone by the creek after a storm was as good as lost. Coyotes, cold, or simple hunger usually finished the story before morning. But when Eli brushed the mud off that tiny red body and the calf still tried to lift his head, the story refused to end there. And neither did the boy. They found him near a dry Texas creek bed after a long night of thunder and hard rain. The hills still held low clouds and the ground felt soft beneath their boots. 2 ranch hands rode ahead, talking about broken fences and downed branches. 12-year-old Eli walked behind them on foot, staring at the ground the way kids did when they were tired and thinking too much. Then he saw a shape near the bank. "Stop!" Eli shouted. The men turned as he ran toward the creek. At first he thought it was just a clump of brush, but then he saw the small hooves, the thin legs, the tiny chest rising in shaky breaths. A calf lay half-curled in the mud, shivering. One ranch hand muttered, "Poor thing's done for." The other shook his head. "Mama probably abandoned it." "Happens." Eli dropped to his knees beside the calf. The little animal's coat was red and slick with rain mud, his eyes cloudy and weak. He tried to move but his legs barely twitched. "He's alive," Eli whispered. "Dad?" he called. Thomas, his father, rode up, face lined from years of sun and worry. He looked at the calf a long moment, saying nothing. "We gotta take him," Eli said. "We can help him, right?" Thomas sighed. "Son, a calf without its mother is a hard fight. He might not make it through the week." "But he might," Eli said. "If we try." It was such a simple sentence, but it carried the full weight of a boy's hope. Thomas stared at his son, then at the calf, then back at his son. "All right," he said at last. "Pick him up. Let's see if he wants to live." Eli slipped his arms under the small, cold body. The calf kicked weakly at the air. "Bronco," Eli whispered without thinking. "Your name's Bronco." The calf blinked as if accepting the deal. They carried him home. The barn smelled of hay, dust, and damp wood. Thomas cleared a corner near the old heater while Eli spread blankets over a thick layer of straw. Bronco lay there, legs tucked under him, his head dropping in slow jerks. "Gotta warm him up first," Thomas said. "Then we worry about food." Eli wrapped another blanket around Bronco's shoulders. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe now." Thomas mixed warm milk and electrolytes in a bottle, his hands moving with the experience of a man who had done this before and lost as many as he saved. He handed the bottle to Eli. "Slow," he said. "Just at his mouth. Don't force it. If he wants to drink, he will." Eli knelt and pressed the bottle's tip to Bronco's lips. For a long moment nothing happened. The calf's eyes stayed half shut, body still trembling. Eli's throat burned. "Come on, Bronco," he whispered. "Please. Don't give up." The calf flicked his tongue once. Then again. Then he took a weak sip. Thomas watched. "There you go," he said softly, more to himself than to the calf. Bronco's swallowing stayed slow and uneven, but he drank. Not much. Just enough to count as a small win. That night Eli refused to sleep in the house. "He needs someone with him," he told his father. Thomas stared at his son's determined face, then nodded once. "All right. But you call if anything changes." Eli spread his own blanket beside the calf and lay on his side, facing him. Bronco's breath stayed shallow, a soft rasp in the quiet barn. "You're not alone," Eli whispered into the dark. "You have me now." At some point the wind picked up. Rain tapped gently on the roof. Bronco shivered. Eli scooted closer and placed a hand over the calf's neck. The trembling eased just a little. By dawn they had made it through one night that most calves like him never survived. It was not a miracle. It was work, warmth, and a stubborn boy who refused to walk away. Days fell into a slow rhythm. Feedings every few hours. Cleaning the straw. Checking Bronco's breathing. Talking to him when worry felt heavier than the milk bucket. Bronco did not turn into a strong calf overnight. He struggled. Some days he drank eagerly, bumping the bottle with surprising force. Other days he lay still, eyes dull, as if the world was too heavy for his small body. "Is he all right?" Eli asked for the 10th time one afternoon. Thomas knelt and checked his ears, his gums, his belly. "He's fighting," he said. "That's all we can ask for." Eli brushed Bronco's neck with an old curry comb. "You hear that?" he said gently. "Long as you fight, we don't quit either." One evening, while Thomas fixed a loose board, one of the ranch hands leaned over the stall door. "You're still fussing with that little thing?" he asked. Most folks would have cut their losses. Thomas didn't look up. "We're not most folks." The man shrugged and walked away. That night, Bronco tried to stand. He pushed his front hooves against the straw, legs trembling. Eli scrambled to his feet. Dad. He's trying. Let him, Thomas said from his stool. Help him only if he starts falling. Bronco wobbled, his thin body shaking like a wet branch in the wind. He rose halfway, dropped, tried again. On the third try he stood. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Eli to grin so hard his cheeks hurt. You did it. Eli laughed. You're really doing it. Bronco's legs buckled and he lay back down, panting. But there was a new light in his eyes. A tiny spark that hadn't been there before. Over the next weeks, that spark grew. He learned where the water bucket sat. He learned the sound of Eli's footsteps. He learned that every time he heard the boy's voice, something good followed. Warm milk, a scratch behind the ears, soft words that wrapped around his fear. Slowly, the calf who had been almost left for dead started following the boy with his eyes. Then he started following him with his feet. By early summer, Bronco walked on his own. His steps still looked a little clumsy, and he stayed smaller than the other calves his age, but he moved with purpose. The first time Thomas opened the barn door to let him outside, Bronco froze at the threshold. The bright sky and wide pasture looked too big after so many weeks of wood walls and shadows. Eli stood beside him. It's just outside, he said quietly. I'll go first. He stepped into the sunlight. Bronco stared at him, then placed one hoof on the packed dirt, testing it like it might disappear. When it held, he took another step. Then another. The world smelled different. Grass, dust, distant water, warm air. Every sound seemed louder. A crow called from the fence post. A breeze rustled the trees. Bronco flinched at each new thing. Molly, the old ranch dog, trotted over, wagging her tail. She sniffed Bronco and sneezed, then circled him in a slow, friendly loop. Easy girl, Eli said. He's new to this. Bronco followed Eli across the small pen, staying so close that his nose brushed the boy's shoulder more than once. Give him space, Thomas called from the fence, though he smiled as he said it. I'm not crowding him, Eli said. I meant the other way around, Thomas replied. The ranch hands watched the pair walk slowly around the pen. One chuckled. Looks like the kid's got his own shadow. As the days passed, Eli took Bronco a little farther each time. First around the pen, then near the fence line, then to the edge of the orchard where the soil felt softer underfoot. Bronco learned the land through Eli. A dry patch here. A low dip there. A spot where the shade felt just right at noon. When the sun dipped low in the evenings, Eli sat on the bottom rail of the fence and watched the sky turn pink. Bronco often stood beside him, resting his chin gently on the boy's knee. You know, Eli would whisper, you were supposed to die in that creek bed. Bronco blinked slowly, calm and steady. But you didn't? So now we gotta figure out what you're meant for. Bronco did not have an answer. But he stayed. Always he stayed. As the months rolled by, Bronco grew into a young bull. He still ran smaller than the others, but his body filled out, his legs steadied, and his once cloudy eyes turned clear and sharp. What set him apart wasn't his size, but his attention. When other bulls pushed and shoved at the feed trough, Bronco stood back until the rush settled. When calves wandered too close to a sagging fence line, he moved quietly, nudging them back toward the safer ground. When Eli walked across the pasture, Bronco lifted his head and watched until the boy reached wherever he was going. He's always looking out, one ranch hand said. Like he's taking notes. He's curious, Eli said, scratching Bronco's cheek. He wants to understand everything. One late afternoon, a neighbor named Hank drove up in a dusty pickup. He came to borrow tools, but his eyes drifted to Bronco standing calmly near Eli. That the creek calf you saved? Hank asked Thomas. That's him, Thomas replied. Hank squinted. He turned out better than I thought. Good build. Come. You breeding him yet? Not yet, Thomas said. Letting him grow into his bones first. Hank snorted. If he was mine, I'd have him earning his keep by now. Bronco watched Hank the entire time, ears flicking, body still. Later that evening, Eli leaned against Bronco's shoulder under the oak tree. You hear him? He asked. They all talk about keeping and selling and earning. But you're not a tractor. He paused. You're my friend. A gentle breeze moved through the leaves. Bronco lowered his head and nudged Eli's arm, a soft, slow push. Yeah, Eli whispered. I know. You feel it too. Life on the ranch settled into a new normal. Days of work, nights of tired smiles and simple meals, morning coffee for Thomas, and morning nose bumps for Eli from a Red Bull who waited at the gate like a faithful dog. No one realized how quickly that peace could crack. Not until the money started running dry. The drought came in slowly, like someone turning down a faucet just a little more each week. Ponds shrank into muddy circles. Grass turned from green to yellow to brittle brown. Bales of hay came in smaller and cost more. At first Thomas said, "We've seen worse. It'll pass." But one night Eli woke for water and found his father still at the kitchen table, papers spread out, calculator silent beside his hand. "Can't sleep?" Eli asked. Thomas sighed. "Can't stop counting." "Counting what?" "Feet. Vet bills. Fences that need fixing." He rubbed his face. "We're stretched thin, son." Eli's eyes drifted to a picture on the wall. Him as a little kid with a newborn calf in his arms. Not Bronco. Another one. One that hadn't made it. He felt a chill run through him that had nothing to do with the night air. "What can we do?" Eli asked. "Sell a few cows. Maybe a horse," Thomas said. "Maybe a bull." Eli's stomach dropped. "Not Bronco." Thomas didn't answer. 2 weeks later, a man in a clean hat and polished boots pulled into the yard. He shook Thomas's hand firmly and glanced toward the pasture where Bronco stood, watching. "That the Red Bull?" he asked. "He's the one I heard about." Thomas nodded. "That's him. Calm around people? Smart. Very good. I'll pay you more than market price," the man said. "He'd do well on my place." Eli stepped closer. "He's not just a bull. Eli," Thomas said quietly. "Go fetch your mother, please." Eli stared at him. "You're really thinking about it?" Thomas didn't meet his eyes. "Just go, son." Eli walked away, but his feet felt heavy. Behind him he heard the man say numbers. Big ones. The kind that could fix more than one problem. At the fence, Bronco watched Eli walk by. The boy touched his neck without stopping. "Don't go anywhere," he whispered. "I'm not ready to lose you." Bronco's ears twitched. Somewhere deep inside he understood one thing clearly. Something was about to be asked of him. And he already knew his answer. The next morning the buyer returned with a stock trailer. The sun had just cleared the horizon, turning the dust a soft gold. Eli stood by the barn, hands stuffed into his pockets, pretending to be busy with a coil of rope. Thomas and the man walked toward Bronco's pasture. "He load easy?" the man asked. "He's never been hard to work with," Thomas answered, voice flat. They opened the gate. Bronco watched them approach. His body stayed calm, but his eyes moved quickly, from Thomas to the buyer, from the trailer back to Eli. "Let's get him haltered," the man said. Thomas stepped forward with the rope. "Come on, Bronco," he said softly. "Walk with me." Bronco took one step, then stopped. He looked past Thomas at Eli standing stiff by the barn, shoulders tense. The buyer tugged on the lead. "He's just testing you. Show him who's boss." Bronco planted his hooves. "Come on, boy," Thomas said, pulling a little harder. "Don't make this harder than it already is." Bronco stepped backward instead, toward Eli. The buyer frowned. "He's got a stubborn streak." Eli dropped the rope he had been holding and walked forward, unable to just stand and watch. Bronco moved to meet him, placing his massive body between Eli and the men without pinning his ears or tossing his head. He simply stood there. "You see that?" the buyer said. "He's guarding the kid." Eli pressed a hand to Bronco's neck. "I won't let them take you," he whispered. Thomas saw the way Bronco shifted to block the man's reach every time he drew near. "Not wild. Not mean. Just sure." "Push him from the side," the buyer said impatiently. "Once he's on the trailer, he'll settle." Thomas held up a hand. "Stop." The buyer blinked. "What?" "Back off," Thomas said. "He doesn't want to go. And I don't want him to." "You just said." "I know what I said," Thomas cut in. "I was looking at numbers. But I'm looking at something else now." The buyer's jaw tightened. "You're passing on the best offer you'll get in a long time." "Maybe," Thomas replied. "But I'm not selling him." Silence fell. Eli let out a breath he hadn't known he held. He pressed his forehead against Bronco's shoulder. Bronco relaxed, muscles softening under the boy's touch. The buyer finally shook his head. "Your loss," he muttered, walking back to the truck. Thomas watched the dust rise as the trailer disappeared down the road. Then he turned to his son and the bull standing side by side. "Your friend has a say in where he belongs," Thomas said quietly. "I should have remembered that sooner." Bronco's ear twitched like he agreed. For a while it felt like the hardest part was behind them. The drought eased. A few calves sold well at auction. Thomas took small jobs fixing neighbors' fences to bring in extra money. Life still demanded effort, but the weight on his face lightened. Bronco settled comfortably into his place as part of the herd. He wasn't the kind of bull that picked fights or showed off. Instead, he seemed to hold everything together. When yearlings butted heads too rough, he stepped between them and ended it with one steady look. When a calf strayed near a low spot in the fence, he nudged it back to safer ground. When Eli checked the far pasture alone, Bronco followed along the fence line until he came back. "That bull is like a second set of eyes," Thomas told Dr. Lawson one day when she came to vaccinate the herd. The vet watched Bronco stand near a nervous young cow, his presence calming her. "He doesn't just see," she said. "He understands." One windy afternoon, Eli sat on the fence, legs swinging. The sky had that strange look it sometimes got before spring storms, full of dark lines and restless air. "Do you think he knows I almost lost him?" Eli asked. Thomas stood beside him, leaning against a post. "Maybe. Or maybe he just knows you always come back." Bronco grazed nearby but looked up when Eli laughed. The bull walked over and rested his chin lightly on the rail beside the boy's knees as if joining the talk. "I guess we both waited for each other," Eli said, scratching between Bronco's eyes. "That you did," Thomas answered. But trouble did not ask permission before stepping onto a ranch. It did not knock. It simply walked in one morning and dropped itself into their lives, wearing the shape of fever and tired hooves. Bronco slowed again. Only this time, it hit harder than before. It started small, a missed greeting at the gate, a half-finished feed pan, a slower walk toward water. Eli noticed first. "Dad," he said, "Bronco's off." Thomas watched the bull stand apart from the others, head lower than usual. "Could be the heat," he said. "We'll keep an eye on him." But the next day Bronco did not walk to the gate at all. Eli found him under the oak tree, lying down even though the rest of the herd was grazing. When he called his name, Bronco lifted his head with effort as if it weighed more than his horns. "Dr. Lawson," Thomas said into the phone. "It's Bronco." "He's not himself." The vet arrived with her worn bag and tired smile. She moved with quick, sure hands checking Bronco's gums, heart and temperature. "High fever," she said. "And his gut doesn't sound right. Could be an infection. Could be something he ate that didn't sit well. Can you fix it?" Eli asked, voice small. "I'll do my best," she said. "But he'll need time." She gave him injections, left powder for his feed and clear instructions. "Keep him shaded. Keep him watered. And keep him company. Cattle heal better when they feel safe." That night, Eli slept near Bronco again just like when he was a calf. The bull's breaths came rough and uneven, sometimes pausing long enough to make Eli's heart stop for a second. "I'm here," Eli whispered whenever panic rose in his chest. "You didn't give up on me. I won't give up on you." At some point, the stars blurred and Eli drifted into a shallow sleep, cheek pressed to Bronco's warm side. He woke just before dawn when he felt a shift beneath him. Bronco was trying to stand. His legs shook like branches in a storm, but he pushed. Up onto his knees. Then to his feet. He stood swaying, sweat darkening his red coat. "Easy boy," Thomas said, hands out but not touching. "One step at a time." Bronco took one step, then another, then lowered his head so Eli could wrap his arms around it. "You scared me," Eli said, tears hot on his face. Bronco snorted softly, warm breath washing over the boy's shirt. He was not himself yet. But he was not gone. And that was enough, for now. A week later, the ranch seemed to move on with cautious relief. Bronco ate well again. He walked slower than before, but his eyes stayed bright. Dr. Lawson stopped by and nodded with approval. "He's tougher than he looks," she said. "Always has been," Thomas replied. One afternoon, a new problem arrived in the form of a newborn calf and a careless moment. Eli and Thomas were repairing a stretch of fence near the south ditch, a narrow cut in the land where water flowed during heavy rains and sat as muddy sludge in drier times. June, a gentle cow, had calved the day before. Her baby wobbled on new legs close by. "Keep an eye on that little one," Thomas said. "Ditches and new calves don't mix." "Got it," Eli answered. For a while, everything went fine. Eli hammered staples, Thomas held the post. The calf sniffed at clumps of grass, testing the world. Then a crow flew shrieking out of the ditch, wings flapping wild. The calf spooked. Before anyone could grab it, the small body slid on the loose soil and tumbled into the ditch. Mud sucked at its legs as it cried out in sharp, frightened bleats. "Damn," Thomas said, limping toward the edge as fast as his injured leg allowed. "Easy, little one." June ran to the ditch, pacing the rim, calling to her baby in deep, worried moos. "Dad, he's stuck," Eli shouted, peering over the edge. The ditch walls were slick and crumbling. If he jumped down he might sink too. Back up, Thomas warned. We don't need two of you down there. Then they heard heavy hooves behind them. Bronco had come at a trot, head high, ears locked on the sound of the crying calf. Bronco, stay back, Eli said. You're still healing. Bronco didn't listen. He moved to June first, nudging her gently away from the edge so she wouldn't fall in. Then he stepped as close as he safely could to the ditch, bracing his feet wide. The calf flailed below, legs sliding uselessly. Please, Eli whispered without meaning to. Help him. Bronco lowered his head into the ditch, stretching as far as he could. The mud sucked at his nose, but he persisted, wedging his forehead under the calf's chest. With a powerful, careful push he lifted. The calf rose several inches. Now Eli, Thomas shouted. Eli dropped to his knees and grabbed the calf's front legs, pulling with all his strength. Between Bronco's lift and Eli's pull, the calf slid out of the ditch and onto firm ground, bawling in shock but unhurt. June rushed over, licking her baby from head to toe. Bronco pulled his head back, breathing hard, mud streaking his face. His legs trembled but he kept standing. Thomas stared at him. I've been on ranches my whole life, he said quietly. I've never seen a bull do that. Eli touched Bronco's muddy cheek. You're the bravest thing I've ever known. Bronco closed his eyes for a moment, leaning gently into the boy's hand. He had saved another life. But in doing so, he had once again reminded everyone what kind of heart beat inside him. Not a profitable one. A loyal one. Word traveled as it always did in small towns. That red bull pulled the calf out of the ditch, Hank told folks at the feed store. He protected the kid from being trampled, way I heard it, someone added, getting the details wrong but the spirit right. By Sunday, people who had barely spoken to the walkers in months drove past slowly, hoping to catch a glimpse of Bronco in the pasture. One afternoon, a new truck rolled in, a different man this time, wearing a fancy vest and shining belt buckle. You Thomas Walker? He asked. I am, Thomas said. I run a larger outfit 3 counties over, the man replied. Heard about your bull. Smart. Calm. Protective. I'm looking for genetics like that. I'll pay top dollar. Eli stood nearby, heart sinking as soon as he heard the word dollar. Thomas glanced at Bronco, who stood under the oak tree watching them. He's not for sale, he said. I haven't even made an offer, the man replied with a laugh. You don't need to, Thomas said. Money's not the only thing that counts. The man smirked. You're running a ranch, not a charity. Think about it. That bull's worth more in my books than standing in your field. You could fix your barn roof, buy better feed, clear your debts. Eli clenched his fists. He already cleared something more important, he said. The man raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what's that? Eli looked at Bronco, then at his father. Our hearts. The man chuckled like it was a joke, but Thomas didn't laugh. We're fine, he said. Bronco stays. As the truck pulled away, Thomas rested a hand on Eli's shoulder. We'll make it another way. I almost made the wrong choice once. I won't do it twice. They walked out to the oak tree together. Bronco met them halfway. You started as a risk, Thomas said, patting his neck. Now you're part of the reason we keep going. Bronco snorted softly, like he accepted the job. The sun lowered over the ranch, painting everything in soft colors, rust, gold, and fading blue. Calves kicked at each other in play. Cows pulled at the tender new grass. Molly dozed in a patch of dust, one ear always tuned to Eli's voice. Eli leaned against Bronco's shoulder, feeling the solid strength beneath his cheek. He had grown taller since the day they found the calf in the creek bed. His voice was deeper. His hands were rougher. But with Bronco, some part of him still felt like that boy with muddy knees and too much hope. Do you remember? Eli asked quietly. How cold you were that night? Bronco flicked his ear. I thought you might die, Eli said. Then you didn't. You stayed. And then, even when you were scared, you waited. At the gate. At the fence. By the barn. For me. Bronco breathed out, long and steady. Thomas joined them and rested both hands on the fence. I almost traded him away for numbers on a page, he said. Would have lost more than I knew. You changed your mind, Eli replied. No, Thomas said, shaking his head. He changed it for me. He made the decision long before I did. He chose us. The 3 of them stood in comfortable silence for a while. The sky dimmed. Fireflies began to blink in the tall grass. Finally Thomas spoke again. You know what I learned from him? What? Eli asked. That real value doesn't shout, Thomas said. It waits. It shows up in the hard moments. It stands its ground when you try to walk away from what matters. Eli looked up at Bronco's calm eyes. He waited for me to come back from school. He waited when I was scared about you getting hurt. He waited when I thought we'd lose this place. Bronco lowered his head and pressed it gently against Eli's chest, careful, slow, like a promise. Eli wrapped his arms around the bull's huge face. I'm not going anywhere either, he whispered. As night settled, the ranch felt quiet but full. Full of work still ahead, full of bills still to pay, full of fences still to mend. But also full of something stronger. A bond that had refused to break. In the years that followed, people kept telling the story. How a half-frozen calf almost died by the creek. How a boy begged his father to give him a chance. How the small calf became a steady bull. How that bull stood between fear and safety over and over again. Some folks who visited the ranch shook their heads. You could have sold him and bought 2 more, they said. Thomas always smiled the same way. And lose the one who held this place together? No thanks. Others understood. They watched Eli walk across the pasture with Bronco beside him and felt something soften inside. One afternoon, an old neighbor asked, "What makes him so different?" Eli thought for a moment. He waited, he said. When everyone else gave up on him, he waited for someone to believe in him. When I was scared or sad, he waited beside me until I felt all right. He never rushed. He never left. The man nodded slowly. Not many people or animals do that. Bronco stood on a small rise, watching the herd, the house, and the boy he had grown up with. The wind moved through his red coat. His crooked ear twitched at every familiar sound. He was not the biggest bull in the county. He was not the most expensive. He was not the most perfect by breeding charts. But he was the one who stayed. That night, as stars brightened in the dark sky, Eli sat under the oak tree, back against Bronco's warm side. You know what I think? Eli said softly. They called you low value. Low profit. Not worth saving. But you became the measure of everything that really mattered here. Bronco breathed deep and slow, his whole body relaxed. Because you taught us, Eli continued, that what we save with kindness ends up saving us right back. He fell quiet, listening to Bronco's heartbeat under his palm. The moral of their story did not need fancy words. It lived in simple truth. Money counted hay and metal and miles. Heart counted faith, time, and staying. In a world that tried to measure everything, one bull proved that real worth lived in loyalty, in courage, and in the quiet choice to stand by the ones who stood by you. Bronco had waited. And because of that, he turned a struggling ranch into a place rich with something better than profit. A place rich with love. The end.